Let's try again. Headlights on. Yeah, it's a fat lot good, isn't it? Headlights off. Oh, now he come up. Marvellous. Headlights on. And now you've gone down. That's good. Well done. Right, the first thing we need to do is get the fuse box out. Here we go. I've got the correct tools here. There we go. There we go, that should do it. There we go, that's the quickest way to get a fuse box out. Hello and welcome to Tim's BMW Repairs and Information. Yeah, it's quite hard work getting an e-box out of an 840, but yeah, this isn't it. Obviously, this is from eBay and it cost me about 170 quid. And I was quite surprised because it came with all the relays. Now, some of the relays are extortionately expensive. Now, we have problems with some of the relays in this. Now, most of them are standard sort of normally opened or normally closed relays, just sort of mechanical devices. But obviously the larger ones of these have electronics in them, and some of them have quite a lot of electronics in it. And that's what causes the problem. Now, it isn't the electronics that goes wrong. It's usually the relay itself, which is quite a heavy metal device, is soldered to the PCB. And as you go rattling down the road, of course, the weight of the relay slowly fatigues the joint to the printed circuit board. So they're not dry soldered joints, they're just fatigued, started off all right and then just wore themselves out. And when that happens, you get funny things going on, for instance, with the headlights on the 840 and of course the 850 as well. Put the headlights on, one headlight will pop up, the other one won't. And when you turn them off, the other one will pop up, but the lights aren't on. Yeah, you get all sorts of weird combinations of things going wrong with them. Yeah, that's a fatigue joint in the pop-up relay. Also, crash control relay, that can become a bit of a nuisance because it will stop you locking the doors of the car and the hazard lights just stay on all the time. That again is a problem with the crash control relay, the relay itself fatiguing the joints. And of course we've got the Servotronic one. Now, the cost of replacement of these is extortionate from BMW. I think you can still get them all. Servotronic's around about 300 quid. Crash control relay, a couple of £100. Pop-up headlight one, again, a couple of £100. So it's much more beneficial if we can repair them, and we can. So I'm going to show you how to take these relays apart, what solder to use, what flux to use, very important. Which iron to use as well, so that we can repair this sort of relay. First point of call obviously is working out which relay it is, and we can go through which of these relays do which function quite easily. And if you go on to meetnet.co.uk/E31, then there's both a fuse diagram and a relay diagram that shows all this in colour and tells you what relay does what function. Okay, so I think what we'll do next is we had problems with the pop-up light, so let's get the pop-up headlight relay out and see what we can do with it. Right, let's get on with it. Rightio, we have the pop-up headlight relay here, and the large ones are all pretty similar things. Now, the problem with these relays is they don't electronically go wrong, they physically go wrong, and we can repair that. Right, to start with, it has a little flap on them. Never quite understood what the little flap was for, but you pull it open like that, and we use the 2 screwdriver method to get these open. One down there, one the other side, and the inside should pop out and the screwdriver shoot off. There we go. Fully successful that one was. So here we go then, here's the relay. As you see, it's got 2 metal relays with the coil of wire on it, on a PCB, and there's a few electronic components as well. So we get a variety of different combinations of relays and electronics. This one's got 2 large relays, a little bit of electronics, a couple of transistors, diodes and so on. Okay, so the problem with this relay will be that when the car's bouncing around on the road as they do, then you get some sort of vibration through these relays, and eventually what they'll do is they'll just fatigue the joint between the metal parts of the relay and the solder joint. So all we have to do is reflow the joint. And the best way to do this is use a really good flux. This is Circuit Works lead-free tacky flux CW8700. Been using this for quite a few years now. It's the best flux I've ever used. Now let's start off with a tiny little joint like this one here. That goes through to the relay. You can see the metal part of the relay there. That's a joint to the PCB. So what we do is we put a little bit of flux on there. Get our iron set to 400 degrees. And the best way to get heat into a joint is to put a bit of solder just underneath the iron. And as the iron goes on, it will squash that bit of solder and it will melt it. And for a small joint like this, it's very easy to reflow. Make sure the solder's gone right to the tip of that joint and onto the pad. And there we go, that one's all done. Now the bigger pads obviously take a bit more work. It takes a bit more time to get the heat into them. So for instance, yeah, this is the largest pad and we've got a joint there that goes to it. But we need to heat up the whole joint rather than just the pin because that doesn't help usually. So here we go, get the solder, get it under the iron. Get some solder underneath the tip of the iron, and it's going to take a little while to heat up that joint. So just sit there and eventually you'll feel the joint start to melt, and then you can move the iron around a bit. Okay, so yeah, don't rush this. It takes a while to get heat from even 400 degrees C iron into the joint. Now this is a light iron, it's probably about 50 watts. Don't need anything more than that to get heat into a joint. If you're using a 100-watt iron or something, there's always a good chance you're going to frizzle something. Okay, so move the iron around. If it is still not melting the joint, it's just starting to melt that joint, by the way. Put a tiny bit more solder between the iron and the joint. As you can see, that's now starting to flow. Yeah, don't rush it, just allow the iron to get the joint heated up. With a temperature controlled iron, then what happens is the iron will cool down below the temperature of the melting point of the solder, and then it will start sticking more power into the iron until it starts to reflow the joint. And again, if we need a bit more surface area, then yeah, just put a bit of solder on it. There we go, and as you can see there, the solder is now starting to flow quite nicely. Then we can move the iron around the joint a bit to reflow, heat up different parts of the joint. And we just go round like that. We wait until the whole joint is melted. Like there you go. So the whole thing is now flowing. Yeah, it feels at the start that it's not going to do it, but it does. And then make sure you get heat in the actual pin of the relay. If needed, put a tiny bit more solder onto the pin, flow it down onto the PCB. Whole joint is flowing there. And then we just leave that to cool back down again. It's well worth mentioning that some of the relays are all electronic and don't have any relays actually fitted to them. And in that case, the failure of the joint is usually on these pins here. And that's the joint between the PCB, which is here, and the pins themselves have got shaped bits of metal go up. And it's those that fatigue. And so you have to reflow all of those. And you use exactly the same routine. So a nice bit of flux on the joint. Get your iron. Also, it's well worth mentioning that temperature controlled irons, when you put the actual iron back in its holster, they generally turn their temperature down. So you have to wait a few seconds for the heat to come back in again. Here we go. There we go, and that's doing exactly the same as we did on the other joints. Make sure the pin's hot, make sure the solder's flowed on the whole joint. So you need to go back here as well, get the solder around there, and that's it, that's done. Okay, putting the relay back in, lift the flap up there. This is the side the PCB goes in, so we slot the PCB into there, push it in, put the flap back, and then give it a push so you can hear it click. And there we go. So make sure these two sides have both gone over. Make sure the relay can't come back out again. And we're done. One relay fixed. Pop-up headlight should work now. Headlights on. Headlights off. And there we go then. Yeah, that wasn't too hard, was it? Yeah, my face is flashing red because I'm waiting at the railway crossing. Yeah, one train's gone past already and they didn't go back up again, so must be waiting for a second one. Anyway, yeah, it's not too hard, and the trick is the flux. It really is that Circuit Works CW8700. That makes all the difference. It makes the solder bead, which is very important, and stops you getting spikes which may go from one to adjacent track or something. You definitely don't want those sort of shorts. So yeah, decent flux. Now you can use a lighter flux, but only for the smaller joints, and the reason for that is that on the larger joints you have to keep the iron on it for longer, and it tends to just evaporate, especially the clean free solder fluxes. Yeah, they just disappear too quickly. So yeah, the tacky flux works really well in that situation. Anyway, if that helped you, put the thumbs up. Please keep commenting. Yeah, love the comments. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. You can fire up the old V8 now. Off we go. Steptronic into second. Of course, my Steptronic gate is the opposite way round to normal, which makes life a lot easier.